I've played some video games. Somehow this channel has made its way to 4,000 subscribers. I say somehow, but it's pretty clear how that's happened. A lot of you have turned up. You, the wonderful, brilliant, amazing and beautifully attractive LTGD audience, have breached this milestone and it's time that I pay you back. So I went about collecting some of your games on our Discord server and weirdly via email, and at your request I've played them, and now I'm going to talk about them. So, let's talk game design. Before we start, I want to say something that is obvious to anyone who's ever tried to make a game, but might not be to the casual observer. Making games, at all, of any description, is hard. You're going in blind with no knowledge of how these magical, mythical things move around the screen, and you're figuring it out through long-winded documentation, 360p YouTube tutorials by some kid from Cuba with a $2 microphone, and forum posts from 2003 where someone asked the exact problem you're having, then replied 2 days later with "never mind, fixed it." So a massive congratulations goes out to everybody featured in this video, as well as the other people who've posted to our Discord to submit their games. If your game isn't in this episode, it'll be in another one, so don't worry. It's just that I only have so much positivity in me at once, and if I said too many constructive and supportive things in a single video, my spleen would explode. A lot of what you're about to see could best be described as a prototype. This is fine, and in fact I think it's a good idea. Don't expect a lot of polish from most of these, since many of them are either hobby projects that I don't think were meant to get any further, or they're still deep in development and their developers just want to get some feedback before plunging years of their life into the misery and suffering that is long-term game production. The way we're going to do this is the only way that seems to make sense to me. I will summarise the game for our lovely general audience, but for the most part I'm just going to talk straight to you, the developer who sent me the game. We're going to have a little chat. I'll offer some feedback and hopefully you'll get something useful out of it. Relevant links for these games will be in the video description, so if you want to check them out, you'll have an opportunity. Right, let's start picking apart people's hopes and dreams for entertainment value. This one got emailed to me ages ago and was the first suggestion that I should cover other people's games on the channel. At the time, I didn't know if it was a good idea or not, but now that I've been dragged kicking and screaming into the realms of audience interaction, I feel like I should go back to the guy who first suggested the idea. It seems only fair. The Cold Climb is a 2D platformer with a couple of interesting mechanics. I say interesting, but what I mean is slightly weird. For example, your jump height and direction are both fixed in the style of the old Castlevania games. This is going to throw off a fair chunk of your modern audience. There's nothing wrong with having it that way, and the game gives you a lot of room in the beginning to learn the limits of your movement options, which is nice. There's also a wall climb contextualized by a pickaxe, which works really well, and is also a good idea, and a freezing mechanic, where you need to bash the keyboard to warm up or else get stuck in place. I worried a lot about that last one because it runs the risk of being tedious, but the way the levels are designed does a good job of justifying it, putting it in situations where it's a relevant consideration to the challenge, rather than just something to slow you down and annoy you. I realise the whole thing is mountain themed, but I worry that the theming is going to get old. Everything that's here is well realised, but there's only so long you can spend on either snowy mountain outside or cold mountain inside before it gets a bit stale, so maybe consider adding another visual theme to the game depending on how much more of it you want to do. Also, occasionally the way forward isn't entirely clear. There's a bit where you've got an open path to the left that seems to lead out of the area, and then a path going down, and when I went left, which feels like the obvious choice, I think I died and the section restarted, which is odd. Finally, keep an eye out for any leaps of faith, where you're asking the player to just plunge into the abyss with no knowledge of where they're going, and then sticking a hazard at the bottom, because that's just mean. Overall though, this is really nice. I really like the presentation, and the mechanics, although sometimes a bit strange, are all cohesive and clearly intentional, so keep that up. You know how I said there wasn't going to be much polish to any of these games about 2 minutes ago? Yeah, I lied. I don't know if this game has a name yet, but the attachment came through as Robo Shooter, and it's another game that got emailed to me, and I respect the old school approach, so I had to bump it up the list. I love covering games like this because I hardly need to say anything. You can see for yourself the quality we're dealing with, and so far the game captures a kind of cave story, Kero Blaster vibe. There's 2 levels of gun power, and they recharge nice and quickly, so the mechanic adds to your moment-to-moment challenge without becoming annoying. Only suggestions I have for this so far is that maybe either the levels are too long, or again we could do with more variety in the setting. The raw video for this is 18 minutes long and it's all exactly the same background. We could either do with more of a break between levels or to mix up the presentation a bit. Also, and I'm aware this is just me, I've come to realise lately that most people are fine and in fact prefer A and D on the keyboard for moving left and right, which I suppose I begrudgingly accept. But having jump on spacebar and shoot on J made me do this weird claw motion with my hand, so I think eventually you're going to need controller support. Other than that, I'm just filling in words right now so I can put more of the game on screen because it's incredibly pretty, and I think people should see as much of it as possible. I do love a good twin-stick shooter, and this is, for now, a good twin-stick shooter. The key difference with this one is that you have a melee attack that does more damage than your average shot, so the idea is to balance that risk-reward thing of getting in close at the risk of being smushed to a pulp, in order to do more damage. The first thing I liked is how much room you give the player to move around in. It's a wide open arena that takes up all the available screen space, and it shows that you understand how movement and positioning is so deeply important in this genre of game. So well done. It's very fast paced. Some people might tell you to lower that speed because it's a bit frantic, but I won't. Please do bear in mind though that I'm pretty seasoned with twin stick shooters, so the incredible speed might be off-putting to people who aren't me. I'd suggest some kind of visual feedback on the portals for when enemies are spawning in. It's great that you can run over them to give yourself more space to maneuver, but the player runs the risk of running straight into a spawning enemy, so some kind of glow or fade in or something would be nice. The biggest issue I ran into though is that there's currently absolutely no reason whatsoever to use the melee attack. You can fire your projectile as fast as you can click the right mouse button, and although it's a lower damage output per shot, the fact that you can fire so quickly makes up for it. It also means you don't have to be anywhere near the enemies, most of which are melee focused, so you can just kite them around the arena spamming the fire button and winning. I'd suggest something like either a cooldown per shot or maybe a regenerating ammo counter, just to mitigate how overpowered shooting things is. This one's in Spanish, so the developer kindly filled me in on what's going on. You're basically playing as the developer, who's presumably a YouTuber, trying to get the algorithm to notice him and grow his channel. You go through some themed levels, like playing Five Nights at Freddy's and Fall Guys, collecting likes and subscriptions, don't forget to like and subscribe, before facing off against the almighty algorithm itself. I'd feel a bit cruel giving feedback on this because it's clearly a personal game, made for fun, about one kid and his friends doing cool stuff, so don't worry too much about the end quality. That said, I am also a cruel, heartless sociopath, so I don't mind telling you that sometimes your collision detection is wonky and you'll occasionally fall off a platform that you probably should have landed on just fine. I worry that what you've done is use the player sprite as your collision mask, so when the sprite is animating, anywhere with a transparent pixel is no longer counted as colliding with the floor. What you want to do to fix this is use a blank static square as your player, and then layer your animations on top. Unless you've already done this, in which case your collision box is possibly too small and needs expanding a little bit to give the player some leniency when it comes to landing their jumps. Overall though, this is nice. It's cute, the art is consistent, and I can tell it's a personal, fun thing that you made, so good job. I also feel that fight against the algorithm on a personal level, so you've got some real solidarity from me there. You know how I said I was going to try and be nice and positive and lovely and wonderful for this video? This is where that all falls apart. Not to sound harsh, but I struggled to play this for more than about 5 minutes. Don't worry though, I'll get into why and what you can do to fix it. You're alright, relax, calm down, take a breath. Right, so we've got an auto runner where you're focusing solely on nailing some jumps. So far so good, except that the camera is zoomed in way too close. The thing with auto runners is you need to be able to see what's coming next so that you can react accordingly. Most of them will place your player sprite at the far left of the screen to give as much real estate as possible for the player to plan their next move. In fact, I will direct you back to the very first video on this channel, where I made an auto runner to try and shake off the rust I had from not making games for nearly 8 years. Next there's the wall jump. The wall jump doesn't work half the time. I originally thought this was because my monitor ran at 144 frames per second, so I dropped it down to 60 and it was still impossible to do consistently. In the end I found myself bashing the button every time I came up to a wall and just hoping it'd get me where I wanted to go. So I think you need to look into the timing involved and how much time you give the player to press the button, because I'm assuming that window is incredibly small. Finally there's the soundtrack. Now I love some good chiptunes, but what you've got right now sounds like someone's novelty car alarm, and it was probably the main reason I could only stomach this for about 5 minutes. I don't want you to panic though. These are all fixable, and the fact that you've got the auto running part sorted is a good start, so you're okay. First thing you need to do is fix the camera. Move your player further to the left and zoom the camera out. Start there and I guarantee you will notice an immediate change in the quality of your game. It's another twin stick shooter, which is brilliant. I love that this is a complex, multifaceted boss fight. This is probably the most prototype thing that got sent in, as it's just the boss fight with some free choice of weaponry. Movement is nice and the basics are in place. It took me a shamefully long time to realise that the coloured box was demonstrating which type of attack the boss was using. So when you come to put this in the main game, please make sure that's perfectly clear. The shotgun is utterly useless, so consider boosting its damage output to offset the short range. Also, the sniper rifle is massively overpowered, but the biggest problem is the collision box. It's way too large, and the gaps that you've got to ease through the attack waves are minuscule. Just to refer back to my first video again, because I clearly want that sweet view count, I talked about how to be fair to the player, and what player bias is. It sounds counterintuitive, but you generally want to give the player much more of an advantage than they think they have, to make up for their poor reaction times and make them feel special. You want to take your collision box and shrink it down, so that when the player skips through an attack wave, they feel like they came much closer to death death than they actually did. The reason you want to do this is that it takes away a player's excuse, and when you're trying to make something difficult, you want the player to have as few excuses as possible for losing. You want to be able to point to your game and say something like, well, I gave you every opportunity to do well and you still failed, so it's on you, so that they don't feel cheated. Otherwise, I think you've got a very solid prototype base to move forward from, and the boss battle's a really cool concept, which I like a lot. What I'm learning from this video is that a lot of people are making twin-stick shooters. We're ending with this one, which might be the most complete of all the games I got sent. This was made in a university club, showing that maybe university isn't a complete waste of time after all. I will tell that to my media degree. It comes to us from the Illinois State University Game Development Club, whose acronym looks like this, and not one to be rude, but I wouldn't recommend trying to pronounce that out loud. It follows the Binding of Isaac approach, where every level is randomly generated and then there's a boss at the end, but with slightly more of a hardcore Space Marine one-man army kind of aesthetic, rather than Isaac's tumor punk look. It's really good. I don't really have anything to criticise about it, and the only thing I can say is if you wanted to take this to a full commercial release, just add more. More guns, more enemy types, more interesting twists on the mechanics, and maybe something that rewards long-term progression over multiple runs. Other than that, it is really solid, and probably ties with the robot shooter game as the most polished thing that somebody submitted. And that is all we have time for today, otherwise this video is going to be 3 hours of me picking apart people's creative output, and there's only so many dreams I can crush in a single video. Congratulations again to everybody whose game got featured here, because game development of any nature at all is hard work. And if yours didn't, but you've submitted it to our Discord, don't worry, it will be in the next one. But we're not done. You might remember not so long ago, I made a game in 10 minutes and challenged ADS 852637778 to do the same, and he only went and did it. His video is linked below, and what you need to do now is go watch that, then watch what I made, and tell me in the comments which one of us you think came out with a better game. This will determine the ultimate champion of being brilliant at making games in a short amount of time, or UCOBBAMGIASAOT for short. But wait, there's more. I also extended the challenge out to anybody who wanted to take a shot at it, and wouldn't you know it, I went and got another entry sent to our Discord. Plife, or Pleef, or P-Life, or however that's pronounced, decided 10 minutes was actually too long and made one in just 9 minutes instead. So go and watch that, tell him LTGD sent you, and how dare he upstage me in my own challenge. And then there was Totally in our Discord who assembled this pretty looking thing in 10 minutes, which I think he's still developing. The reason I bring all of this up in a 4,000 subscriber celebration video is that it highlights how amazing you lot actually are. This is going to sound soppy, I know, but you're all pretty brilliant really. I never imagined I'd get 40 subscribers, let alone 4,000. And the community we're building around this little project of mine is something I think we can all be proud of. Right, I've been nice for so long that I need to go and be mean to something, so excuse me while I go outside and shout at my neighbour's children for daring to have some fun. In the meantime, if you've liked this video, then be sure to like the video you liked and subscribe for more likeable videos like the one you liked. Then join our Discord where you can submit your own games to be played and torn apart on the channel, and I'll see you the next time I'm thinking, hey, let's talk game design.